I honestly had totally forgotten about this whole hacked JD Vance Oppo research dossier until this morning when I saw Ken Klippenstein posting it on his Substack and saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to post what, you know, the mainstream media was too afraid to post." Why were they too afraid to post this research dossier on JD Vance? Well, because it was allegedly produced by an Iranian hack, from what I remember.
We can go ahead and throw up this article from his Substack, which is Read the JD Vance Dossier. This is what he was linking to. I'll go ahead and zoom in here. Read the JD Vance Dossier. We're publishing the supposed Iran hack document. Here's why. Behold the dossier. It reportedly comes from an alleged Iranian government hack of the Trump campaign, and since June, the news media has been sitting on it and other documents, declining to publish it for fear of finding itself at odds with the government's campaign against foreign malign influence. I disagree, Ken writes. The dossier has been offered to me, and I've decided to publish it because it's of keen public interest in an election season. It's a 271-page research paper the Trump campaign prepared to vet now vice presidential candidate JD Vance. As far as I can tell, it hasn't been altered, but even if it was, its contents are publicly verifiable. I'll let it speak for itself. And I think that's important to point out. A lot of people were raising alarm about how this has information such as JD Vance's home address in it. I kind of put that in our group chat, and you guys, my girlfriend Salisa and Gavin pointed out, like, basically anybody could find that. That's public record, so it's not exactly like a gotcha.
It's pretty easy to find most politicians' address.
And then he goes on to add that if the document had been hacked by some anonymous like hacker group, the news media would be all over it. I'm just not a believer of the news media as an arm of the government doing its work combating foreign influence, nor should it be a gatekeeper of what the public should know. So that's kind of Ken's reasoning behind why he chose to publish it. I think it's a valid journalistic position. I also think it kind of works out better that a journalist like Ken Klippenstein, just a guy with a Substack who's not an arm of MSM, he's not out here working for NBC. He's not hosting a Pod Save America style show. He's doing this as a guy in the Midwest who left the swamp because he didn't want it to be impacting his reporting, an impact on his, outlook on the world. Went back to, I think, Wisconsin is where he's reporting from now. And he was like, I'm going to drop this. People can make up their own minds. And it's important stuff to look into.
Before we look at some of the more interesting contents of the dossier itself, I think this is potentially the most revealing angle to this whole story, the most damning angle to it. And that's the way Elon Musk responded, right? So, I mean, I don't think there's anything that's that damning of a revelation in this dossier to begin with. Not that I've seen. If there is, we'll definitely hear about it. But that didn't stop Elon Musk from immediately suspending the account of Ken Klippenstein as soon as he published this, despite the fact that, of course, as you guys know, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, when he came in and started running Twitter, his whole idea, his whole vision for the company was that he wanted to bring back the First Amendment. He wanted to bring back free speech because of how things had gone awry under the previous regime, how Twitter had become censorious. And that's why he employed journalists like Matt Taibbi, right, to pin the Twitter files and to expose the censorious corruption going on behind the scenes at Twitter. One of the main reasons, of course, and one of the biggest stories that's consistently cited is the Hunter Biden laptop story. We talked about it at the time. I think we had Glenn Greenwald on to discuss it a couple of times. And, that was really pointed to as a huge example of a giant social media company deciding to censor a story right before an election because they thought it would hurt the candidate that they wanted to win, right? That was like the main story that was talked about in the context of the Twitter files. And again, the censorious nature of social media platforms, but specifically Twitter. Again, they literally, and it was crazy in my opinion. I don't think it was the right thing to do.
Facebook did it too.
Facebook also did it. They literally disabled the link when you tried to post the link to the New York Post article, which discussed the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop. Why? Because they said it was hacked illegally. Bunch of excuses. Bullshit. I think a lot of the excuses had to do with the fact that it was nude photos on the laptop. So they were saying like, this is like revenge porn. You can't just, talk about the contents of this laptop because it contained nude images. And it's like, well, I mean, no one was saying they had to publish
tongue
the
like a horse. He could publish it all around town. He wouldn't be ashamed of anything.
that too, but also like the New York Post wasn't actually sharing pictures of the guy's penis. Journalists weren't sharing the full nude images. Some of them were, but I think a lot of a lot of the censorship that was going on, specifically with that New York Post article, the excuses given were bogus. It was censorship, and it was correct to call it out as an attempt to interfere with the election and media coverage. Not that it ultimately amounted to anything. I don't think that that's why Trump lost. I don't think it really cost him a single vote at the end of the day. But still, just from a First Amendment and free speech perspective, yeah, I think it was ridiculous for Twitter to disable the sharing of that link, for them to disable the spreading of that article. Same thing with Facebook. I mean, obviously the New York Post publishes tabloid garbage all the time. It was a very selective enforcement of censorship because it made Joe Biden look bad. Let's be honest, right? In the same way, all of a sudden, guess what? It's September 26th. Election's right around the corner, guys. Less than 2 months away. Less than a month and a half away, in fact. And Elon Musk, who now owns X.com, one of the biggest social media platforms in the entire world, and who also is potentially Trump's biggest donor, if not his number one donor, easily in the top 5, right? Guess what he's using Twitter for? Guess how he's using this platform now to do the exact same thing, but to benefit the candidate that not only he wants to win, but that he's literally donating to. Jack Dorsey or whatever, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he was donating to Biden. It literally seems like Elon Musk, who's Trump's top donor, is now using his social media platform to help Donald Trump. Obviously, we've all seen that happening already. It's been going on now for months. Elon Musk promoting these insane right-wing influencers, promoting smears against the Democrats on the top of the Twitter timeline, stuff like that, clearly putting his thumbs on the scale. But I think this is potentially the most brazen violation of his stated principles in regard to free speech yet, and specifically because it so eerily mirrors that situation with the New York Post. Now he's the one censoring.
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's so much to unpack there, Gavin, but you hit the nail on the head. It's like first as tragedy, then as farce, right? History is bound to repeat itself this time. It's hilariously inverted. Both fold. You have Twitter, X.com, whatever, and Facebook, this time both kind of joining forces. I don't know if you saw this post from the Daily Beast, Gavin, but Mark Zuckerberg is a born-again libertarian this time around. And why Mark Zuckerberg is Trump's libertarian phone buddy now? Do you know why, guys? It's because they're all scared shitless of Lena Khan. They're afraid that Lena Khan's going to come in there and bust up their company. And so now they're like, holy shit, we have to make sure Donald Trump is president, because Kamala Harris is actually going to go in there and do one good thing. She's going to break up the monopoly, guys. That's what I think her intention is. She's actually going to bring the chickens home to roost in Silicon Valley.
This is hilarious, guys. So obviously Matt Taibbi, famed Twitter Files star. So High Progressive says, paging Matt Taibbi, can we get a Twitter Files investigation on this, please? With the screenshot of Ken's suspended page, taking a page out of our book, High Progressive. We love to make this exact joke whenever possible. Matt responds, to this tweet where High Progressive says, Ken published the Iranian-hacked materials on JD Vance and was subsequently banned. Pretty much exact mirror of what Matt Taibbi, Elon Musk, etc. were hand-wringing about with regards to the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story during the 2020 election. But Zach, High Progressive is wrong. I don't know why you like this tweet, because as you're about to hear from Matt Taibbi, it's actually not the same at all, bro. It's completely different, obviously.
No, it's not the same, because unless the FBI had a direct hand in publishing the documents or rather, preventing the publishing of these documents, then I don't really see how it's in any way compatible to what folks like Glenn Greenwald and I have been, really trying to beat down the walls for. And what I think, if you want to ask me what I think the real hypocrisy is that, that they're now somehow, trying to pretend like they care about this kind of thing when it's so clear that they just don't, right? And
Yeah. So stupid. Like, I hate this goddamn gaslighting. Why are you still at this late date after being thoroughly used and abused and thrown away by Elon Musk? Why are you still defending him? And why are you still acting like this is not, of course, obviously the exact goddamn same thing that high progressive references? Of course, it's the mirror image of what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And even if it's true that the FBI didn't have a hand in getting Ken suspended, like I said, guess who owns Twitter right now? Donald Trump's number one donor, Elon Musk, someone who's also a massive defense contractor, who has government contracts, not with just America, but with Ukraine, with a bunch of different countries, with his Starlink shit and Tesla and SpaceX and all this stuff. You don't think that Elon Musk is part of the deep state? You don't think Elon Musk is an elite, who's pulling the strings of our discourse and deciding who can say what, who, gets to report on what they want to and who can't? Of course, that's what's happening, Matt Taibbi. I don't give a shit about I mean, I do care about the FBI, but they're not the only, they're not the only like organization which is shadowy and powerful and influential as far as what goes on behind the scenes and who's actually pulling the strings.
It's so obvious now. Like he has nowhere to go. This is the only way. It's like identical in every other facet other than the fact that nobody's linked it to the FBI because Elon has sole control over it. He's not actually listening to the government at all. And also, what the fuck, dude? Like, way to not stick up for a fellow journalist. Ken Klippenstein, I know for a fact, is a journalist that Matt Taibbi is familiar with, worthy of everyone's respect. Ken Klippenstein is a great eye, a watchdog on the deep state, on the intelligence apparatus, something that Matt Taibbi cares or claims to care deeply about, right? So anyway,
that's a great point, Zach. That's a great point. No solidarity with fellow journalist Ken Klippenstein. And by the way, Ken Klippenstein is not some partisan Democrat cheerleader. That's not the point of his coverage at all. I don't even think he's like, endorsed the Democrats. I don't think he's like publicly said, I am voting for Kamala Harris. In no way is he like some dim operative. He's not some, liberal media propagandist for the DNC. No, he's an independent investigative reporter. He publishes stuff like this all the time when he gets his hands on it. He oftentimes, puts out posts on like Telegram, saying if you have information, send it to me anonymously and I'll publish it. That's the kind of journalist he is. He's the kind of journalist that Matt Taibbi pretended to be when he was publishing the Twitter files, right? Oh, I'm going through all this documents and data, getting the truth out there, regardless of who gives it to me, bro, regardless of who gives it to me. That's the point of being a journalist and shit, man. That's actually what Ken Klippenstein does, which is why he published this JD Vance dossier. Again, regardless of whether or not you think there's anything of journalistic merit within it, he says, look, the people have a right to see it. The people have a right to decide for themselves. I'm going to publish it. That's all he did. He didn't say, here's the JD Vance dossier. Now, donate to Kamala Harris at this link. Obviously not. It's completely ridiculous. So Ken Klippenstein, again, just to reiterate, is exactly the kind of journalist that Matt Taibbi pretends is the kind of journalist that has the most integrity. That's who Ken Klippenstein actually is. But instead of sticking up for him, someone who's also been fucked with by Elon Musk, Matt Taibbi just has to make excuses and continue to gaslight everyone.
100%. And let's hear a little bit from Ken Klippenstein, his thoughts on Twitter banning him. For people who don't know, Kenny Clips, Kung Fu Kenny. This man was a true poster. This guy was a poster until the bitter end. We're hoping he gets reinstated. I think he's been clipped once before and got back on Twitter. We'll wait and see. You know what? Elon Musk is a fickle fella. If there's enough public outcry, potentially Kenny gets back and Elon pats himself on the back and is like, see, I'm fair. I just put you in timeout. And he tries to make a joke out of it like a boomer. But let's read a little bit. Self-styled free speech warrior Elon Musk's X, Twitter, banned me after I published a copy of the Donald Trump campaign's JD Vance research dossier. X says that I've been suspended for violating our rules against posting private information, citing a tweet linking to my story about the JD Vance dossier. First, I never published any private information on X. I linked to an article I wrote here, linking to a document of controversial provenance, one that I didn't want to alter for that very reason. Here is the, proof that Twitter, banned him for these reasons. He says, the principle involved here is complex. I do not believe it is the job of the news media to alter documents, as if it's a de facto government deciding what the public should and shouldn't know. Yes, I know that is a general practice to delete private information from leaks and classified documents, but in this case, not only is Vance an elected official and a vice presidential candidate, but the information is readily available for anyone to buy. That's true because it's all public listed real estate information, which I didn't realize at first, but I think Ken argues really effectively.
Mhm.
And I think he makes a great job of explaining why he didn't feel the need to alter the document. He goes on to write that the document itself describes its method at acquiring the so-called private information about Vance. Quote, we undertook an examination of all readily available and relevant electronic and online records, several hundred Nexus and news articles, dozens of active and archived web pages, and several dozen public records from Nexus and resources of various federal, state, and municipal government offices. In other words, everything was out there either readily or for purchase. We should be honest about so-called private information contained in the dossier and private information in general. It is readily available to anyone who can buy it. The campaign purchased this information from commercial information brokers. Those dealers make huge profits from selling this data, and the media knows it because they buy the data for reporting purposes, just like the campaign. They don't like to mention that, though. On the one hand, this is very funny end to my Twitter journey. On the other hand, I no longer have access to the primary channel, which I decimate primarily news and shit posts, of course, to the general public. This chilling effect on speech is exactly why we published the Vance dossier in its entirety. Not a single media organization was willing to publish a document that would have been no-brainer during a prior to the heyday of Edward Snowden's disclosures. That illustrates the dramatic shift, in attitudes about which the news media thinks the news or the public should know. The role mainstream media plays in steadily ceding that territory to the national security threat machine. Media's job, I believe, is to publish back against these various forms of censorship. I'll keep doing that here on this newsletter, where you can find me going forward. If you agree with what I laid out, I hope you subscribe. Did I make a mistake in not redacting private information on JD Vance? If I wanted a Twitter account, apparently so, but on principle, I stand by it absolutely.
Interesting. I think it's interesting he brings up the Snowden era, because we have a response from Glenn Greenwald. Some people in our chat were wondering what Glenn's opinion on this whole situation would be, myself included. And I'm interested, Zach, in your take, because he kind of responds to some of what Ken says there. Glenn Greenwald, there's no question that the Vance report that was published did contain information that should have been redacted prior to publication, including Vance's home address. But not only that, the solution is to take that down, repost a redacted version, and reinstate Ken's account. So I'm glad that he's calling on Elon to reinstate Ken's account. That's definitely more than Matt Taibbi. But what's your opinion on this, Zach? Because I think that Ken Klippenstein made a very compelling case for why that's unnecessary.
Yeah, if you would have asked me maybe 5 hours ago when I was sitting in the office going through this originally, I would have been like, oh, man. And actually, there is a video of me when I was rehearsing today being like, guys, I'm not sure about this. Like, maybe I would have done this. People that I trust in media have said you should do this, right? I'm not a journalist. I don't know, right? I thought about that.
Yeah.
But then reading what he wrote, and that was the first time I'd read it, his response when I was prepping for the show today. The Twitter ban announcement hadn't come out yet, or I mean, it had been announced, but he hadn't, typed up a response for his Substack. And I think he did an excellent job of making the case, and I'm with him. I think he showed balls. I think he stuck to his nails, and I'm a big Ken Klippenstein fan. We hopefully we'll have him on the show again to talk about this experience, talk more about why he's drawing that line in the sand as a journalist, because we need more people like him. Gavin and I, we're not journalists in the way that Ken Klippenstein is, right? So we don't know all the ins and outs to this kind of baseball. But what we do know is that Ken Klippenstein is a real one. And I thought he made the case well there. I was happy that Glenn called on Elon, to make that right and say, hey, if you want to come back to Twitter and publish this, you have to just 86 the address because it violates the Twitter doxing thing. I saw another guy from Zateo. I forget his name. He's a St. Louis reporter. He follows the Vanguard. What's up, bro? I forget your name. But I was like, oh, yeah, see, that makes sense. He's like, oh, if I published this, I would have done that, right? But I think I think you could have a real journalistic ethics discussion about it. And I would love to see people, two individuals that I trust to always, put the story first without, compromising their ethics, have that hash that out a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I'm buying what Ken's saying, but I'm also not the kind of person who's qualified to really weigh in on that. You know what I mean? Like,
we didn't go
to. I agree with Ken though a little bit.
Yeah, Zach and I, we did not go to journalism school, and like you said, we don't really consider ourselves journalists. That being said, if you have a spicy scoop you want to send our way, feel free to. We're always willing to take a look at what people send our way. Sometimes, people send us interesting tips, or like, hey, check out this, or here's a piece of hot goss. We love that kind of shit. But yeah, obviously we're not paging through documents the same way that someone like Ken Klippenstein is. We're not going to be offered the JD Vance dossier like someone clearly offered him. I do feel for the guy though, right? He talked a little bit about that at the end of his Substack article, right? Kind of jokingly saying, this is funny, but low-key X, it is one of the few ways that I can disseminate my reporting, that I can get my Substack pieces out there, drive subscriptions to it, etc. So I think that, like you said, Zach, this is another piece of proof that Ken Klippenstein is a serious reporter, that he's putting this sort of information above his own career. Because like you said, he could just, kind of cower to the mob, but he's like, no, this is in the interest of the public. I think people should be able to read it. And yeah, it's probably going to cost him. Not having access to Twitter as a journalist is a huge disadvantage. That's one of the reasons why we keep talking about Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi and the total hypocrisy on this issue of censorship, because it's actually really important, guys. I know that Twitter isn't real life and stuff, but in the world of media, in the world of journalism, it's actually a very important tool. It's a very useful tool as far as getting your information and content out there, and as far as doing research in the modern digital age. That's the unfortunate reality of the situation. Zach and I probably have more insight into that than your average person, so it might seem more important to us than your average person. But yeah, this is a big deal, guys, and it's really, really unfortunate, in my opinion, from a free speech perspective, that Elon Musk is still in charge of this company. I was always critical of Twitter, just like I've always been critical of all these giant corporate social media platforms. But as I've said before, all of the censorship that happened in the pre-Elon era seems like just trivial, completely trivial, in my opinion, compared to what we've seen since Elon Musk took over.
Oh, yeah.